want to be happier and healthier. And after today's show, we're going to show you the way to get there. With me is my Doug Vermeeren, who, now you're, I guess, a little bit famous for creating the Opus, a really inspiring film.
Oh, thank you.
Great film, very successful. And now you have this new project on gratitude, and it's called Gratitude Experiments.
That's right.
Why do you call it an experiment?
Well, I think the thing about gratitude is that many people do know it's important, but they don't necessarily know how to practice it. So within the film, we talk a little bit about how you can really get some results in your life with gratitude. But here's the thing is the results that you get won't be the same for everyone. So even the experiment, you're kind of part of it once you get involved practicing gratitude, right?
Hey, the only way to see if it works is to try it, right?
Exactly.
So right now you currently are in some theaters, but you also can buy it yourself, people can buy the DVD or download it. And let's take a look at what the DVD really says.
What is gratitude? Does gratitude really make a difference? The world that we live in is not always a peaceful place. It's a world that's often filled with negativity, heartache, pain, and sorrow. In parts of the world there are disasters and tragedies that are natural and man-made. Will gratitude really change any of this? Will gratitude make a difference? Perhaps you've recently lost your job. Maybe you've even been unemployed for some time. Maybe you've gone through a divorce or a bankruptcy. Maybe even all of the above. Is it possible to still feel gratitude in moments like this in your life?
I mean, that is the key question. How do you feel gratitude when something is just falling apart in your life? How do you, I mean, it makes sense up here, you know, but
of course, but in the moment, when you're feeling those emotions, it's really hard to do these kinds of things, you know. I think really for me, you know, when I did this film, that was one of the questions I wanted to answer. How can we help people recognize that you can find gratitude even in the most challenging of circumstances? And gratitude really, it comes down to making a choice, you know, keeping in mind that I'm a firm believer that when we're in the midst of that emotion, it's a difficult choice to make. So you almost need to make that choice ahead of time. You need to pre-plan it, if you will, that's the route that you're going to take. I'm a firm believer that any events that happen in our life, right, we get to assign the meaning on them. And the meaning that we assign to them, whether it's good or it's bad, it's negative or positive, whatever meaning we give it and we see in it will expand. And so as we begin to look for the positive in it, and not just to have like a happy feeling about, but really to look for the positive. What are the blessings that are here? If we can really find those blessings, they'll expand and they'll grow.
This is like whatever, I mean, there's some theories about, you know, if you have a belief, then you'll find evidence to support that belief. So if your belief is that things negative are happening to you, then you'll find, you know, evidence to support that.
Yeah, and it's even beyond just the idea of belief. In fact, brain science illustrates that we have a reticular activating system within our brain, and that, you know, for example, if you go out and you buy a brand new Ferrari, all of a sudden you start driving around and you see everybody that has this brand new Ferrari, either a similar model or a similar car. So we see what we're sort of attached to, what we're committed to, what we're emotionally invested in, and again, what we value and what we believe. And so if we are looking for these things to support that belief that there's goodness in a situation, even if it's negative, we'll find that goodness.
Now, in the trailer that we just viewed, it seems like, you know, it's almost like watching today's news.
True.
It's one tragic event after the next. One murder, one fire, one tornado. I mean, it just keeps going. How much of this do we blame on the media?
Well, you know, that's a great question, and I guess just also to your point, that's why we included it. We felt it was very important for us to come from a place of reality, not kind of like airy-fairy, everything's fine and let's just gloss it all over and not take a look at it. The truth is the reality of the world that we live in is that there is a lot of challenge for us, and most of it is man-made. Most of it, in many cases, is self-inflicted. You know, we create a lot of the challenges that we have, and let's face it, there's a lot of people that live in the world that really feel a sense of power from being a victim, and so so they look for these dramatic situations to keep reoccurring in their life. And so we really wanted to address that that's real. Now, back to your point of the media, I think also we recognize that the media knows that inside every human being, we sort of have the desire to sort of look at that traffic accident as we walk by, to sort of almost look at these challenges that we have and cringe and sort of take notice. And so that's what they feed us, because we're prepared to receive it. We want to receive it. And so, you know, a lot of what we do in the gratitude experiment is try to kind of shift that paradigm, if you will, that viewpoint, if you will, that we don't have to seek for negativity. We don't have to feed on that to feel like we're a whole being. In fact, quite the opposite is true. If we can feed on the gratitude and the power and the, you know, the positive things, we can feel a lot more fulfilled than, you know, thriving on negativity.
You know, it seems like everything is working against that theory, though. For instance, oftentimes, you know, you get a cold, you know, and you know when you're not sick and you're feeling good, you kind of take it for granted. It's like the normalcy of your life. Then you get sore throat or something, and then all of a sudden, boy, it was really nice when I didn't have this. Why is it that we always notice when something is going wrong and don't give credit, you know, throughout the day when we're feeling okay?
Well, again, I think it comes really down to being comfortable, right? When we're comfortable, we really don't take notice of things. You know, I mean, even right now, as you and I are sitting here, if I said, you know, notice your heart beating.
Right.
You know, unless it stopped, you probably wouldn't have noticed it otherwise, right? But, you know, when it just flows, when it comes to us naturally, it's very easy now for our attention to be diverted to things that are maybe not running smoothly, or things that need to be improved upon and fixed. In fact, one of the things that I do in some of my seminars, I believe that there's 5 key areas that everybody needs to feel successful. Your feelings about your abundance, your relationships, your health, yourself, and your connection to spirituality. But if you ever want to know where someone's off balance or what they're missing, ask them what their current most important goals are. If they say finances, it's because they're being unfulfilled in that area, or there's a leak in that area. So whatever you don't have is what you want, right? Because when we want it, we don't crave it any further. We feel fulfilled there, right?
Well, for instance, in relationships, there's, you know, a lot of people kind of postpone happiness in that, hey, I'm not going to be happy until I get married, until I have children, until you know, fill in
whatever the setup is,
whatever, and have a good job. You know, and what do you tell those people?
Well, first of all, happiness is a choice. If you're always looking for happiness beyond where you are, you're never going to find it, right? It's in some ways, you know, kind of a bit of a catch-22. People plan that they need to have X amount to be happy, and then, of course, once they, you know, start working on this process, or even once they get there, they still feel unfulfilled because they're looking beyond the mark. So my advice would be just the same as with gratitude. In fact, one of our speakers in the film mentions it this way. There's a difference between gratitude for and gratitude in. Gratitude for is really based on what's happening in your life, the things that you're bringing in, the things that you have, the things that you're accumulating. And if you're always basing your gratitude or your happiness on what's coming or what you need to have, you'll always find that there's lack. But if you're grateful for in other words, what's going on at the current situation, the now, the essence of what's going on in the moment, then you'll find happiness. And it's interesting because I think of experiences in my life. You know, I look at the past, and yeah, I mean, the past doesn't really affect where what's going on immediately right now. And like, I mean, I've been there, I've done that, but if I use that to define who I am, I'll always be unhappy. Same thing with the future. If I look at the future and say I coulda, woulda, shoulda, it's coming, I'm looking at all these things here. If I define my happiness on what's coming, I'll also be left unfulfilled, because the truth of the matter is, it's kind of like what John Lennon says, life is what happens to us while we're making other plans. So my happiness, to be truly happy, I need to be in the moment. I need to be in the now. And now is such a really fragile thing for most people. We're always looking at either the past or the future. We're never looking at the now. And really, to be successful, it has to be now, right? It can only be now.
Are there a set of exercises or tools that you use so somebody can transition from knowing that, hey, I should be thinking the glass is half full instead of half empty, you know, but how do you look at it to be half full?
Well, I think one of the first thing to do is just like what you talked about, you know, you can't be taking things for granted. You have to have an awareness of what's going on. So for me, one of the exercises that I like to do is sometimes just to pause, which is hard for a lot of people to do because we've got so much outside noise. So to pause and just really kind of take an inventory. And, you know, for me, the way I do my inventory is I start in my mind and I just imagine that here I am with nothing. and I add things. First thing I add is my breath. Next thing I add is I hear my heart beating. Next thing I add is the clothing I've got. Maybe some of the positive relationships, and I start expanding these circles of what do I really have. And it doesn't have to be a long process. Oftentimes, even 30 seconds into it, I begin to realize that, wow, I actually do have a lot more than I really thought about in the beginning.
Yeah, well, how about when you have, really serious catastrophes happening? You have, like what happened with some of these school shootings, what happened with the Boston Marathon, with the tornadoes, and you have, young children dying.
And even this week with Oklahoma, some of the challenges that happen there with the tornadoes. It's really tough, and I mean, being part of the human experience, all of us are going to suffer negativity somewhere. There's going to be ups and downs. That's just part of being human. And so how do you find that negativity in there? Well, I think, again, it comes down to what you're going to be focused on. Like just taking, again, the Oklahoma tornadoes here. One of the things that's amazing to me, and we were watching the news this morning, my wife and I, to hear some of the stories of human courage, where humans have come together to support each other and lift each other out of tragedy and out of challenge. And I find that it's those moments that we learn the most about ourselves. Because when everything is going fine, it's easy to say, okay, it's easy. Life is just a piece of cake. But when we get into these difficult circumstances, it really tries us, and it causes us to demonstrate what we really are inside and what we're really capable of. And the things that astonish me is, although those situations definitely come with some things that bring tears to us and that cause heartache and sorrow, we also see the inspiration that comes from us. And that's what allows us, I think, as humans to overcome things, is we can really quickly see that we're capable of amazing things that we don't always even give ourselves credit for.
Yeah. Somebody once told me that if you look at life like, hey, I'm going to lose my wallet X number of times, you lose your wallet 5 times in your life. You'll get flat tires, 8 times in your life. You lose your cell phone, 4 times in your life. So when it happens, you kind of already anticipate it, and it's not that big a deal.
Isn't that true? And that's something that that I also believe in, is that if we have correct expectations going into a situation, honestly, we can be more prepared to deal with them. In fact, why are people angry, frustrated, hurt, and it's because their expectations aren't met. That's 100% what it always comes down to. We come into a situation, we have an expectation, maybe a spouse is going to act a certain way to us, or someone's going to pay us something that they owe us, money that we've lent to them, or a son or a daughter is going to act a certain way, and then they don't. And so what happens is we become frustrated because our expectations are unmet. So I'm a firm believer that when we go into a situation for the best outcomes, we should maybe align our expectations to be more correct of what could happen.
And how do you balance that between, on one hand, you want to be optimistic about something you're doing. On the other hand, you don't want to have, exaggerated expectations.
Well, I think there's a couple things to consider. And in our short time here today, I believe that there's 4 ways that our brain actually thinks and sorts out information. In fact, there was a study that was done at Harvard several years ago that said the average person has about 70,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those are negative or neutral. Well, we've all heard about negative thinking, but most of us don't know what neutral thinking is. And there's really 4 kinds of thinking. And that's the negative thinking, again, that, woe is me, it's all going to fall apart. Neutral is that we don't think of anything. It just kind of happens. It's the way most of us run our life. Ritual tendencies. We do what we've always done because that's just the way that it is. The next is positive thinking, and we've all heard of positive thinking, but the problem with it is positive thinking is reactionary thinking. So we sort of need an emergency to look for the silver lining, right? But the kind of thinking that most of us don't do all the time, the one that we really should be focused on, is called empowered thinking. That's where we're proactive. We decide ahead of time what our thoughts are going to be. We decide ahead of time what we will expect. And we do prepare for the good and we prepare for the bad, but we go in ahead of time prepared. And I think if we come in with more of this empowered thinking, it just changes the entire situation for us. We're more empowered when we come in. And because of that, we can, be more balanced. We can be, a more rounded individual, right?
Yeah, these theories that you talk about in the gratitude experiment, do they work throughout any culture, every country? I mean, it's the same, philosophy. You're from Canada. There's, Europeans have the same way of thinking as Americans, or?
Well, it's kind of cool that you asked that question to me, because yes, I am from Canada, but I lived for 2.5 years in Europe. I was in France, Belgium, Germany, and Holland, and I also lived for a year in China. And so I had a chance to see a little bit of the world. And I'll tell you, there are some things that are very, very very different between, you know, and I did all my school in the United States, by the way, so I was here at least for 2 years straight doing that.
Right.
So I see the Canadians and Americans, we're very, very similar, except for a couple of the words that we throw in. You might have heard me say A. But a lot of the things that we think, our culture, we're very similar. Europeans are, again, a little bit different, but there's a lot more similarities to us than, say, in Asia. When I was in China, night and day. Very, very different culture, very, very different ways that we sort of deal with each other as individuals and communicate.
You talk about a Russian story in your book.
Oh, that's true, yeah. Yeah, and also we did actually bring in some cultural things within the film. In fact, in the film we've got a story of a couple in a Russian wedding who used gratitude to expand their, you know, their funds for their wedding, I guess, if you will. Yeah, I'm trying to be careful not to give too much of it away, you see. But yeah, so to answer your question, culturally I think there are some differences. But the principle of gratitude is, in fact, universal. You know, and the ways to bring gratitude, more gratitude anyways, into our life, the laws, if you will, of gratitude are universal. And that really comes down to what we focus on expands. The vibration that we sort of put ourselves into also aligns us with that harmonious, gratitudinal, you know, flow, if you will. You know, all the things that are coming into us. So there are ways to do that regardless of what culture you belong to.
You know, one of the biggest challenges I think that all parents have is in raising your children, you want them to have a better life, have more things than we had growing up. But then our kids grow up with a sense of entitlement and don't seem to have much gratitude for the things that they do have. What are we doing wrong?
Wow. You know, this question of kids is kind of interesting because I've got two myself, and they're both very, very different kids. And so, you know, neither of my kids, thank goodness, are severely set in this pattern of entitlement, but I know that there are a lot that are there. But the thing that I have noticed as a parent is that I have to sort of raise them both very differently. You know, they both have very, very different needs. And I think that for me to, you know, to share with them gratitude, it's not something that me as a parent can inflict on them or teach them. They have to discover it themselves. And the only thing I can do as a parent is to be a guide. And the most important thing I can do as a guide is to really try and understand them and to listen, and where the teaching opportunities appear, to make them subtle, not overbearing. Because of course, I don't know if this was the case with your kids, but I know that the more forceful I come with the lessons that I think that they should know, the more resistance is there. And so it's kind of like that old proverb you may have heard, is people are like spaghetti. You can pull them, but you can't push them.
Okay.
If you try to push them, all of a sudden there's huge resistance there. So, you know, I think it's a journey of self-discovery that you have to help ignite within your kids themselves, right?
And I think we Americans are the worst offenders of that. My wife's from Peru, and Peruvians and South Americans in general raise their children much differently than we in America do. I mean, they're much stricter in a lot of regards. Like in America, I mean, every kid feels entitled to a cell phone, for instance. It's not that way in other places around the world.
No, that's true. Yeah, and I've seen that too as I've been in China, for example. You know, there's certain privileges that, you know, children, I think, should have to work for.
They just have to make the cell phones there.
Yeah, they make them and ship them out. But I really am a firm believer, you know, effective parenting is really done by teaching responsibility and consequence. And children really only learn that as they see either rewards or punishments for things that are either good or bad. And sometimes I think a tendency of a parent, because we love our kids so much, is if they make a mistake, we're very quick to rescue. And I think sometimes we need to let them simmer with a challenge so that they can learn the lessons in it themselves, right?
Yeah. We have a little bit more of a video from your DVD. Let's take a look at that.
Thank you.
Gratitude's about a conscious choice that we make to access not only the joy, but all the abundant blessings that are there for us that usually go unnoticed.
Gratitude is our conscious awareness that we are in the vibration that is harmonious with abundance.
Gratitude is an awareness of what we're receiving.
Well, if you give attention to how grateful you are for everything you've got, everything's going to come.
Living with gratitude is knowing that everything is going to be okay.
It's gratitude that provides a foundation for success.
I have experienced that gratitude is the juice of life.
Gratitude is a matter of life or death.
And speaking about death, when somebody dies, it's a very sad time, particularly as we talked about earlier with children. How do you reach down? I mean, yeah, it's nice to say you should have gratitude, you should think a certain way, but I mean, how do you really, enact that?
Well, you're right, it is a tough thing. And even in our family, we've experienced death. In fact, I've got 3 brothers, and my brother, just younger than I, they had a baby die of leukemia when he was about 2 years old. And that was a really tough thing for our family. I won't deny that at all, that when we encounter those situations, it's a very, very difficult time for people. So how do you find gratitude now? Well, the first thing that I'd say is I don't think it's as easy as just saying it. It takes time. It takes, really some healing to be able to find that in some circumstances. And oftentimes that personal reflection. And I find that, for our family anyways, what happened is, over time we were able to find the celebration in that life. We were able to find the goodness that came in from that life. Now, is it still sad today? Of course it is. We're humans. It's something that, we miss that person, we miss that little guy, and it still affects us. But at this point, we're also grateful for the lessons that he's brought. And I can see, quite frankly, looking back now, how that event brought our family closer together and was able to anchor us closer to our faith and the things that we found most important. And let's face it, when, a family member dies, all of a sudden we reevaluate our priorities in many circumstances. And I know that there were members, even of my own family, that reignited certain parts of their life that they knew that they'd been letting go of or that they hadn't been focused on because they'd gotten so caught up in the worldly things, material things, and the day-to-day things that all of a sudden now when, the passing of this little guy happened, everybody began to remember what was most important.
It's interesting how we label an event that happens to us as either positive or negative.
Yeah.
But at the time, we really don't know. I mean, at the point you're making now is that oftentimes you'll think if something is just, terrible or negative that's happening to you, then, a year or 2 later you look back and you see that, hey, that was a lesson or an event that I needed to experience to move on to something else.
Well, I think we judge a lot of the events that happen to us based on the context that we're living in at the moment, the challenge of it, but also our beliefs surrounding that and so forth. And so I think sometimes it takes a little bit of a separation. It's almost like when the accident happens, it's like a pebble, right, that we have in our hand. When it happens, we're holding the pebble so close to our eye because it's immediate, right? And we can't see anything beyond that pebble, but as soon as time allows us to sort of put that in perspective, the pebble's still there. Our family still feels the loss of this baby, but now we can see the perspective of everything else around it, and we see it really for what it is. It still hurts. It still sometimes can be a point of sorrow for us, but at the same token, we can also see the gifts that it brings, right? And when that pebble hits the pond, that's when the ripples appear. And it often doesn't happen until we let go of that pebble. Because too often we're hanging on to it, hanging on to the tragedy. I've met several people, throughout the course of my life that are so excited to be a victim for whatever has happened, whether it's a death or any other tragedy, they'll never let it go. And so therefore the perspective never ever appears. And they never let go of the pebble to see the ripples that it's really caused in a positive way because they get more power out of being the victim.
Do you personally believe that anything that happens to you in life is unfolding in your best interest? Every event?
I do. It's kind of what Albert Einstein talked about too. The answer to really us in life, whether we're going to be happy or not, is our belief on what kind of universe we believe we're in. Do we believe that we're in a supportive universe or a universe that's against us? And if we believe that we're in a universe that's against us, it doesn't matter what happens. Everything is against you, and you're going to feel terrible. But if you're in a supportive universe, believing that things are moving towards you, the way I word it in my life is that I believe that everyone's out to sabotage me, but in a good way. Right? They're out to pave the way for my success wherever I go. The people I encounter are genuinely interested in helping me and seeing me improve. And if I look at it that way, I find those kinds of people. I find those kinds of opportunities. I find everything that I do, even if it doesn't work out immediately, is on the road to working out. And by the way, just one other thought kind of with that, I don't believe there's such thing as succeed and fail. I don't believe that that's the way that life works. I believe that everything in life is what we call the law of probability, which was what Aristotle said, that which is most probable is likely to happen. So everything that we do leads to probability, whether it's I meet the right person or I meet the wrong person, I've discovered now the probability to increase the likelihood that I'll achieve my goal. right? Every fall is kind of like falling up the stairs. We still kind of go down, but we're always going up and forward, right?
Right, so once again, you shouldn't really be judging each individual act.
No.
Because you really don't know.
No, 100%.
What it really means when you look at it into perspective.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would agree with that.
What is the difference between your film and like The Secret?
Well, again, I love The Secret. I think it was a brilliant film. It opened up a lot of doors for people like myself and other filmmakers that are looking at doing these personal development films. I think that The Secret, I've heard a lot of people talk about how maybe it didn't have all the answers that are there. And my response is, guys, it was a 76-minute film. It was the beginning of a conversation, and we need to look at it as such. And so I think, you know, for films like mine that follow and other filmmakers that follow, I think that these are now additional, if you will, viewpoints on that conversation, additional tools for people to implement information from that conversation. And so, you know, I think that was a good starting point for you. And one of the major differences that I find with my films that I try to share is I really try to get into the application, the how-to. You know, so now that you've been given the what needs to be done, here's the work, let's get to it.
And you use the word work. Is it actually? I mean,
100%
it is
work.
work. I mean, it's like exercising a muscle, right?
Yeah,
Working
yeah.
out.
Well, here's the interesting thing is too many people, like, let's just even use this analogy. Too many people are like they're going to the gym, right? Like the fitness center, and they'll look in the window and they'll say, man, I'd like to be fit. I can see I can be fit. I get this inspiration I can be fit. And then they keep walking past the gym.
Right.
The truth of the matter is your life won't change till you get in and get on the treadmill or get in and start pumping the weights. Like, no one can do your push-ups for you is what I'm saying. And so I think that that's really an essential part. You know, the most important ingredients, if you will, for success is, number one, you, because if you're not involved, you can't do it. Next is, honestly, time, because it will take time, practice, and then lastly, a correct formula. And if you're missing one of those elements, like if I've got a correct formula, but I don't inject myself into it, well, I'm not going to be able to do anything. If I've got a correct formula, but I don't take the time, I'm not going to be able to do anything. And same thing with the practice. It's like a heart surgeon, you know? If I were to have the correct formula for being a heart surgeon and I'm involved, but I've never put in the time in practice, who's going to want to have me operate on them? Right?
Yeah.
All essential
These
ingredients.
are great techniques. It's a wonderful video, but you need to keep practicing the elements inside.
100%.
I hope, we put your website up there.
Thank you.
People can get more information about the Gratitude Experiment. You can buy the DVDs, you can download the DVD, or else some you can see it at some theaters. There's actually, I think it's still in Las Vegas at the United Artists Theater 8.
We've got a couple theaters around the world that we're showing it in. So.
Yeah, so I have a lot of very grateful. I have a lot of gratitude for you being here on our show.
Oh, thanks. It's been fun, hasn't it?
See, I'm already learning.
Excellent.
Be sure to visit us online for more information about today's guests. To see past shows or even contacting us about being on the show, simply go to theedbernsteinshow.com. That's theedbernsteinshow.com.